Not me making all that noise. Hi, everyone. Welcome in. Thank you all so much for being here today. We've got a few people trickling in, so I'm just going to go ahead and open up the waiting room. But while we are waiting for people to come in, I want to take a second to say hello, to introduce myself to you. So some of you I know, some of you this is our first time meeting. I'm happy to be sharing this space with you, but I'm a little frustrated that this is how we are meeting. Similar to Marcus, really happy that I was able to meet him a couple of weeks ago. I'm frustrated for the circumstances in which that we met. But my name is Sarah. I am the founder and head coach of Mindful Miles Running, which is a community for women. We focus on mindfulness habits, personal development, and intuitive movement. Today, I am here sharing this space with Marcus from Warrior Meets Scholar. Marcus, I'll let you kind of jump in real quick and say where you're from and what you do.
All right, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, like we said, the reaction that sparked this conversation and the event that happened, that's a terrible event. It creates a visceral response from me personally, which it does a lot of people. So in my company at Warrior Meets Scholar, my goal was to help our community be safer as much as possible. And that is an outreach to as many people as I can get. So, but a little bit about me is I originally am from around Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I was a competitive runner for a long time. So I ran throughout high school and 4 years in college. I was first team all conference in cross country and track and field. So I understand the running space pretty well. Since I got into martial arts, running has been more of an augment to just get better at martial arts because that's my newfound love. I have been training in martial arts since I was originally, I think I was 20 when I first learned Muay Thai kickboxing. I got into some Kung Fu and weapons training in 2008-ish and been training ever since. Most recently, I've started training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I've been pretty well versed in the weapon arts, or I mean the martial arts, plus I've had weapons training from private sessions and group sessions with firearms training and some other stuff like that.
Awesome. Thanks, Marcus. And can we just do a show of hands for those of you that have video on? And for those that don't, you can go ahead and put in the chat box. This is a seminar for all women, but if you identify as a runner, can you just give me a hands up or me in the chat box? Okay. All right. And if you identify as just a badass woman that moves her body and wants to be safe, can you give me a heads up or a me in the chat box? All right. Okay, cool. So we've got a pretty good split. Again, this is for runners, but it's for everyone. And Marcus and I will kind of get into that a little bit. Just a little bit of housekeeping for everyone today. We've got Natalie Casper in the room. She is the operations assistant over at Mindful Miles. She's going to be taking notes for you today. If you want to take notes, you're more than welcome to. But Natalie is going to be recording this. She's going to share the recording, and she's also going to share the key takeaways. If Marcus has any gear or things like that to recommend, she'll be sharing the links with you and all of those things. So really, I know it's a Saturday afternoon, but I ask just be as present as you can be in this moment with us. If you have questions, I'm going to ask that you either virtually raise your hand or put them in the chat box. That way we can kind of keep a healthy stream going. But all that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. I would love to start just with a little bit of a meditation for us all today. If you're not familiar with meditation, it's going to be about 3-5 minutes max. All I want you to do is close your eyes and take some deep breaths. Let me kind of guide you through this, and we'll go from there. So if you are in a space right now where you can close your eyes, I would like for you to. If you can't, that's totally okay. Just gaze down at the floor. And I want to take a moment here for us to just start taking some deep cleansing breaths before we get started. Leaving some space to acknowledge the lives that have been taken, the women that have been harassed, and the women of color and Indigenous people who have not been as noticed as they should have been. And while you're here, I just want you to focus on slowing down and deepening your breath. So breathing in through your nose and sending that air as far down to your body as possible. So maybe you feel it in your chest. Next, we can feel our stomach expand. From there, can we send that air all the way down to our feet? And while you're taking these slow breaths, I want you to feel your body getting heavier and sinking deeper into whatever is supporting you right now. With every exhale, your legs, your hips, your back, your shoulders are getting heavier and you're feeling more grounded. And with each inhale, you're inviting a sense of calm, a sense of peace, and a sense of safety. The one thing that I want us to meditate on today is belonging. So if at any point you feel uncomfortable, I want you to remind yourself that you belong here. This is your body, this is your power, this is your community, and this is your run. You belong here. You belong on the sidewalk, you belong on the road, you belong on the trail, you belong on the treadmill, you belong wherever the hell you want to be. And if at any point throughout this conversation today you feel uncomfortable, just remind yourself, I belong here. Because the things we're going to discuss today will very likely feel heavy, but they are necessary for you to confidently move forward as a woman in this world. So if at any point something feels uncomfortable, remember that you have the power to hit mute, to take a couple of breaths, to come back into your body if you need to raise your hand, to ask questions, because you belong. And we want you here, and you deserve to be here. So taking a couple more deep breaths, I just want you to wiggle your fingers and toes, start to bring some awareness back into your body. Maybe shake out your shoulders, roll your head around, and take one more deep breath. And on your exhale, just let it out hard and heavy. Open your eyes whenever you're ready. So the one thing that I want to start here today with, and again, you can use your virtual hand, you can use your real hand, you can use the chat box, is I just want you to raise your hand if you've ever been on a run and felt uncomfortable. Like, I can't name what that is, but like something weird is happening. Okay. And if you've ever been on a run and you've seen someone at the end of the street or something felt wrong and you just crossed the street, has that ever happened to you? Or a walk? Run and walk are synonymous today, guys. Yep. Have you ever, and this could be with anything, it could be on a date, it could be on a run, it could be walking to your car at night. Have you ever done something and it felt weird as hell and you look back and you think, wow, that could have been a very bad situation? Yeah. Okay. That's why we're here today. So Marcus and I had the opportunity of meeting, 2 weeks ago now, Marcus? And it was
Something like that.
Yeah, it was shortly after the news of Liza Fletcher's death. And I was a mess, like many of us. And the conversations that we had about ways to better protect ourselves as runner was so potent. And that's why I knew we had to put this together. Again, I want to give you the warning that some of his stuff is hard to hear. Marcus is really incredible at what he does, and he knows how to talk and he knows how to keep us safe. So just know that if any of this is triggering to hear, we have to, it's one of those things that unfortunately we have to kind of go through together. But for everyone that raised their hand, you're going to walk out of this today feeling more confident and ready to just run through a brick wall. So let's go ahead and do it. I will stop chatting and I will let you take the floor now, Marcus.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Sarah. That was very well said, and that was a really good capture of exactly what we're going to cover today. So let me share my screen here. I think it's going to hit permission, right? Okay. Can you allow me to share my screen so I can get the PowerPoint up?
Yep, you're good.
I think that's it. Okay, so I'm a poor with an old computer, so bear with me. All right, so let's get this going. Okay, can everybody see a PowerPoint that says self-defense and situational awareness training? Sweet. Okay. So that is essentially what we're going to cover today. Obviously, because this is a virtual class, it's going to be situational awareness based. The self-defense in any situation, if you get to the point where you're hands-on, your situational awareness has failed, my guess, rough estimate is I always say about 12 times in 12 different places before you got the hands-on. That's how far ahead you can look to avoid situations, okay? And I don't just say that, because we're in this class. This is actually what I teach all of my students. All right, let me see. Why is this not? Okay, there we go. Okay, so a little bit about me. I've been in the martial arts for well over 16 years. I've been training pretty much full time for over 16 years. Those times in college and then those first couple of years out of college, it was really inconsistent. So I don't really add them to my resume, even though I was still kind of intermittently doing them. I'm an NRA certified firearms instructor. That is what my requirement was needed to get my Utah certified concealed firearms permit instructor certification. I've gone through executive protection training. So I'm a former executive protection specialist. I believe that everything that I have is kind of expired because I do want people up to date on that. However, I've gone through that training with some top tier people. People that have protected like heads of state from other countries. And that's who put the protection on. So that is probably one of the most valuable pieces of training that I've ever gotten when it comes to self-defense, because that's all based around preventing anything from happening before it ever happens. Okay. I am a competitive Muay Thai practitioner still. I have a couple fights under my belt. I'm almost 40 years old. I know Danielle's laughing right now because she knows that I'm older than her. Yeah, so I still have some fights coming up. So I'm still very active in it and I love it. That's just how much I like it. I have an MBA in executive management. So I am not just a meathead. I actually put a lot of intelligence into my training. And, I understand the corporate world and I understand that people don't have the time to dedicate hours and hours and hours of day to training. Okay, so this is why the situational awareness comes up big time, because all this stuff will translate even into your private life. And I'm the owner and head instructor at Warrior Meets Scholar. So the business has been open for just over a year and a half now. We specialize in striking arts of Muay Thai and Kung Fu, weapons training, specifically structured around the knife. Okay, knife for defensive use. And we've also recently picked up a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu program. So I teach everything from 6-year-olds to elderly people if they walk through the door. So basically 6 years old until you're still breathing. I teach you. Okay, so I'm big on quotes. Let me get this a little bit on So I'm big on quotes. It's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. This is a Chinese proverb. And I like this quote a lot because people like to question why I train the way that I do. Because we live in a civilized society for the most part. We live in a rational society for the most part. However, that's a shifting scale. And we're going to get into statistics, but those statistics only matter as a whole. One-on-one basis, your statistics go right out the window. Okay. So if that small probability that something happens, I want to be ready for it. I don't want to be that gardener that's like, oh, what do I do here? and I'm in this war of a situation. So that's kind of the mindset that you want to have. And mindset's huge on what we're going to discuss today, especially with situational awareness and being prepared. Okay, so these are our learning objectives. We're going to go through definitions. We're going to go through the definition of self-defense, the definition of situational awareness, the types of attacks that you will encounter throughout your life. There are several. Most people only think of the most obvious one, but we're going to go through the other ones. And then what is the strategy of conflict? That's one that is very rarely taught in my experience. I've only had one person actually teach that to me. Situational awareness is going to be one of the learning objectives. Okay, so that's based around statistics, your mindset, the strategy, the tactics that you'll use, and then putting it into practice. Okay. And then use of force, which becomes really important as well, because it's based on the laws that are within your state. So I'm legally allowed to talk about the state of Utah. However, I believe that probably very few of you are in the state of Utah, correct? So you're going to have to be responsible for learning what the use of force is in your law. So I'll give you an example. Utah is a stand your ground state, so I don't have to run away. I can stand right where I'm at and I can fight from my position. However, where I moved from in Pennsylvania, you have a duty to try to retreat first. So it is not a stand your ground state. So if you have the option to escape, you must attempt that at least one time before you're allowed to defend yourself, which is one of the most asinine things I've ever heard of in my life. But that's the law. And unfortunately, you have to know your laws because that's what's going to get you in trouble at the end. Okay. We're also going to go over what the force continuum is. And then tools to use. These are your weapons. Okay. So there's dedicated weapons and there's improvised weapons. So we're going to go over both of those. Okay, so this looks like a full slide and it kind of is, but they're super important. So we'll start left to right. Okay, self-defense. The definition of self-defense is the use of reasonable force to protect oneself or members of the family from bodily harm from the attack of an aggressor if the defender has reason to believe that he, she, they are in danger. Okay, so the key part on this is reasonable force. Now, in the year 2022, the word reasonable is a very shifting scale depending on where you're standing in the United States, especially. So if you are in a more conservative area state where for example, I'll use Utah, where it's a stand your ground state and the reasonable use of force is a little bit more accepted of you can defend yourself, you have that right, versus we'll call it a more liberal area where we had a lot of the riots in the last couple of years where district attorneys are prosecuting people for defending themselves. That scale is a shift. You may not agree with that scale at all, and I completely respect your opinion to do that. However, you have to be aware of what is considered reasonable where you're at, okay? Because you could end up in jail or in prison for a very long time based off of what people consider reasonable now, okay? And you are judged by a jury of your peers. And that's actually kind of scary if you think about that. So what they deem reasonable is really what you're being judged on, not what you personally deem reasonable. So you have to be aware of that, okay? Now, situational awareness. This is a key component to basically avoidance of any kind. So that is the perception of the elements in the environment within a volume of space and time, the comprehension of their meaning, and the projection of their status in the near future. So basically what that means is you need to know what is going on around you. The best example I can give for this is if you're at an four-way intersection and you look both ways and you see it and you're about to cross the street because you have a walk symbol. However, you see somebody barreling down at 100 miles an hour from your left, in your direction and they're less than 100 yards away, do you think they're going to be able to stop in time? Probably not. Okay. So that's an example of being situationally aware of something that's happening and then predicting what is going to happen in the near future. Okay. So the situational awareness doesn't actually stop or start and stop when it comes to a person threatening you. This is just in general. And as a runner, if you think about it, if you're running in an urban environment, so through the city, there's all kinds of, a lot of times there's alleyways, there's side streets, there's people that aren't paying attention, people are loading off of trucks, all that stuff. So all those obstacles are there. So kind of picking your path and navigate your way through that so you don't trip, you don't run into anybody, you don't cause any damage to property. That's a super important thing. So this is a holistic approach to knowing what's going on around you. Okay, so attack types. There are 3 major attack types. Okay, everybody knows the physical. So that's your grappling, whether it's an impact attack, so that's somebody trying to hit you. Projectile, either somebody shooting at you or throwing something at you, or a piercing attack. So that's somebody trying to stab you with something or cut you. Okay, those are pretty obvious. Everybody generally understands those. Now these next ones, people have a little bit of, they don't consider them an attack, and maybe they do, but they don't know how to classify them. Okay, so, and there's even further breakdown between these two. So the psychological attack is one of the most non-physical attack that you will encounter. And generally speaking, that's going to come from a stranger. So these are verbal attacks, written attacks, or some sort of physical expression, like I flip you off like this. Okay. So an example of this would be if you're running and somebody starts catcalling you. That's a psychological attack. They're trying to get some sort of verbal or physical response out of you by directing a verbal attack to you. Okay. And you'll notice that I have stranger in parentheses here. So a psychological attack, generally speaking, is going to come from a stranger, somebody that doesn't really know you. Okay. Now, your spiritual attack, this also is psychological, but it goes much deeper than that. And that's why it becomes a spiritual attack. So this is what would cause almost this visceral response from you. And a lot of times, the majority of the time, this is somebody very familiar with you. So this would be like a spouse, another significant other, maybe a dear friend. And a lot of times with the attack is to try to draw you into some sort of destructive habit by guilt or shame. So I'll give you an example. This is an easy one. A lot of people can, well, not necessarily relate to it, but they can understand the example. So if you're a recovering alcoholic and your friend wants to go for a drink and they're trying to guilt you into having just one drink, just that one drink, it's just one drink. Come on, it's just one drink. I want to go drink. Come on, aren't you a good friend? And that's drawing you back into your destructive habits. So that's an example of that. In even, friends fat shaming people. That is another form of it. Stuff like that. Especially if you're very, very self-conscious of that quality. Okay. And then something that you've wanted to change in your life, like you had a real bad eating disorder or something like that. So those are the things that kind of quantify a spiritual attack. Okay. So these are you need to be aware of these 3 because there's going to be a defense mechanism for each of these. Okay. We won't have the time to really get into all of them, but if you can classify it, define it, you can come up with a plan on how to defend against it. And that's why this is important to know these. Okay. And then moving on to strategy of conflict, there's what we call the 3 Ds of conflict. Any or all of these are relevant. This is what they're trying to do to you or you to them in defense of yourself. It's either to cause death, a distraction, or destruction. Okay. They don't have to be in any order. They can be one or all 3, and they don't necessarily fall in order, but that's the objective of any type of conflict. Okay. Even verbal conflict. So, I can verbally attack you. That's your distraction, especially if I have a buddy that's kind of coming from behind as you're worried about me. Okay. So, you know, destruction would be trying to damage you, or maybe maybe I'm in a, for example, maybe a war zone where I cause an explosion somewhere as a distraction. So I've done destruction and distraction to draw you in to address that, what just happened. And that's when the ambush happened. That's what Al-Qaeda did to our soldiers all the time. So that's their roadside bombs, and then the ambush came in. So that is a prime example of how all three of those come into play. Okay. Now, obviously, roadside bombs, hopefully where you live, are not a issue. So, but those are the things you want to look out for. Okay, so situational awareness. Statistics matter until they don't. Like I said, statistics as a whole matter because they give you the probability of what the population faces on a daily basis or whatever time period. Okay, so let me get this out of the way because I can't seem to see it. Okay, so the most recent attack, which really spurred this conversation, is based around a kidnapping / abduction, same thing, of a woman runner. Okay. Now let's talk about this because that seems to be one of the most frightening things that women bring up when I ask them, what are you most concerned about? This is actually one of the top things on their list, is being kidnapped. And if you look at the statistics, these are pulled from the FBI statistics and some other other nonprofits that pull around like surveys on what had happened around those cases. So in the United States, there's always a lag time on FBI statistics, so they're usually 1 or 2 years behind. When I pulled these a couple months ago, when I did another course, this is 2020, 71% of missing persons were less than 21 years old. So what does that tell you? Why is that important? That means the older you get, the less likely you are to be kidnapped. So if you're above 30, I believe the statistic for a missing person / kidnapping was like less than 10%. So the number one people that generally would come up as a missing person are 30 years or below. And this one, 70% is below 21. Usually it's runaways. Okay. So now if you go to the next line, of all the missing person cases that were reported, around 2% of them were actually involuntary. So this is actually a forcible kidnapping. And if I remember the statistics to this, most of them are actually parents taking their kids. So you're looking at around 15,000 cases of involuntary kidnapping or abduction a year. There's 30-ish million people in the United States. So in the United States itself, your odds of getting struck by lightning like 5 times in your life is actually higher than getting abducted. And as much as I hate to say this, until we really get the findings, this Tennessee case, even though there was a slight connection, indirect connection to the assailant and the victim, this statistically is a random act. So it may have been a target of opportunity, but that still makes it kind of random because that person may have just been wrong place, wrong time. Maybe they patterned this person, but this still is this is pretty random statistically. Also, the thing that goes in these statistics is how prevalent is it in your specific area? And size of your population actually doesn't matter. So in grad school, I did a statistical study that is there a difference between a large city or higher population area and a small town, lower population area for violent crime? Statistically, there is no difference. Your probability is actually the same because it's still same number of cases per whatever 1,000. Okay. It happens more in big cities just because there's more people there. So that's the number of cases increases, but your probability doesn't necessarily increase as you go to those places. Now, let's flip this. If you go to somewhere like Somalia, okay, yeah, your statistics change dramatically. Okay. So these statistics only matter based off of where you are and how they relate to that specific area. So if there's a really high crime area, highly violent crime area, just avoid that area. Now your statistics of anything bad happening are almost zero. Okay. The number two thing that I get is rape, which is totally understandable coming from a female, because that is a big threat. And I believe that happened during this case, because this person that kidnapped this woman, he was a serial like sexual assault person. Like he was already going through a case for, I think, a rape case already. So this guy shouldn't even have been on the street. Somehow he was. So in every single case, I think it was sexual assault or rape was his major crime. Now, what is the probability of this happening? Rape happens a lot more in numbers. So statistically, it's much higher. On a survey, I couldn't find a more recent survey, but usually statistics don't necessarily change too much over time. 92% of victims that reported being raped, it was by an intimate partner or an acquaintance. So if this is going to happen, 9 out of 10 times it's going to be somebody that you are in a relationship with or know, as in like a coworker or something like that, or a friend. And it happens more as like a date rapish type of thing, more than a random person grabbing you and going through the act. And generally speaking, rape cases are dramatically underreported. So in 2018, the survey was taken, 25% of the cases were reported. In 19, this was the number of cases, so times this by 4 statistically on how many cases actually happen. And most likely the reason they're not reported is because they knew the person. They were acquaintance. They had a relationship with them. Most likely that's why they weren't reported. So that's a physical attack, but in a way it's also coupled with a psychological attack, because they knew this person well or knew them enough to get into a close-up situation with them. So there's a twofold attack to this, and that's how those intertwine. And that results in 75% of these cases not ever being addressed by law enforcement. So if you see how this all ties together, that's an important note. Okay. And this is actually the third one is actually the least thing that I hear when I talk to any females that come into the gym or just randomly, like what they're worried about. Targeted attacks. And I classify this as assault. So this is anytime somebody puts their hands on you physically. This is a push, a punch, a slap. However, in the United States, there's around 1 million of these a year. It doesn't differentiate between men and women in the FBI statistics database, but this is pretty much your highest probability of an attack happening just every day, any given day. So I say these statistics, they matter until they don't. So in the case as a whole, these, everybody's probability, I think I ran the numbers. It was like you have 0.00047% chance of being kidnapped. However, if you're being kidnapped, you have a 100% chance because you're kidnapped. So if you ever find yourself in the situation, being afraid of it is kind of one of those things where it's not the thing you should be highest alert of. However, you need to be alert of that it does happen. However, it happens randomly. So how do we how do we defend against something that's random? Well, we increase our situational awareness so that we just find ourselves in the best position possible. And we get into that, I believe, next on how we do that. Okay, yes, we do. Okay, so this is what I call the cost value proposition of any type of engagement. Okay, so I have on the left here the bad guy. The bad guys are always looking for the easiest target. They do not want to pay a high price to achieve their attack, whether that be a kidnapping, a rape, or assault, okay, or even theft. And they will run away from a fight. Now, the good guy, they don't prey on the weak. That's why they're good guys. And I'm aware that this is for females, so if you're offended by the guy part, my apologies. This is what I had in here. And then mindset determines you as the good guy or good woman, your victim cost. Okay. If you fight, you are raising the cost of any type of engagement that it is. Okay. So in the middle here is what I have, the cost threshold, just as a visual and example. Now, this may be further left, further right. It's not going to be 50-50. Okay. So just realize that this is not the scale. This is going to be individual based on the person who is doing the attacking. So on the far left, that's the lowest cost of engaging with you. So that's, you just completely surrender. You give zero resistance, none. They grab you and you just go, yes, sir. And I walk with you. Okay. Or you just stand there and don't do anything. Okay. Don't even raise your voice. Then you have the far right, the highest cost. Now that is you giving every ounce of your blood, sweat, tears, and soul to get out of that situation. Okay. Now, where this yellow and black meet, that's the minimum cost of FAFO. If you don't know what FAFO means, that means fuck around and find out. Okay. So that line right there, that is the line that you need to fight to, which is going to be a different line based on a different attacker. Okay. So that line right there needs to be the minimum fight that you give your opponent. That is the point where that is too expensive for the bad guy. Okay. That may be, don't touch me. That may be too much. That may be, I pull a gun and shoot them. Okay. So that's a very vast scale, I know, but you have to be willing to go to that point, because at that point, your bad guy stops fighting you. Okay. That could be a
for a second.
Yep.
So I have a suggestion that I would love to hear your feedback to, Marcus, but I think it's really important for us to also understand that level of self-awareness of when you're in situations, if you are a fighter or a flighter, because if you don't know which one you are, it's hard to have that prepared and ready. And so let's put in the chat, or freezer. Yeah, Danielle, thank you for that. If you can put in the chat, if you know which one you are, fight, flight, freeze. There's also fawn, but that's not necessarily applicable here. And if you don't know, just put IDK. But I'd be really curious to see where we land. And if you don't know, I would say, can you remember a time where you had an oh shit moment, where maybe you almost got hit by a car, someone cut you off, something like that? What was your response? Did you curse them out, or did you completely freeze and say, what just happened? Or what did you do? Okay, flight, a lot of flights, freezer, okay. And I think this is, so again, back to what Marcus is saying here, it's uncomfortable to be going on runs or walks and thinking, well, if that guy down the street comes at me with a knife, this is exactly what I'm gonna do. But Marcus, correct me if I'm wrong, this is what we have to do to be able to, if we're ever in that situation, not freeze or know what we need to do. I don't know. I lost my train of thought there, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so that's actually a really great point. So those are the basic behavior patterns: is fight, flight, or freeze. So we call it submitting. Okay. So the worst thing that you can do is actually freeze. Now, when I say, and that doesn't necessarily mean stop. Okay. Freezing means that I'm incapable of taking action. My brain has locked up to the point where I cannot take action. Fighting could be your best option. It may be your safest option, actually. Fleeing, your flight response, that may be your safest option or your best option. Everything is going to be situational dependent. Now, if I actively stop because I know if I stay right where I'm at, I'm in the best position I can be in, that's not freezing. Okay. That is actually taking action. That's more of a fight response because I'm fighting for a spot. I'm fighting for the best position. So actively stopping, if it's a calculated stop, is not freezing. Okay. Also, like I said, there's not really a wrong. I won't say that there's a wrong thing to do because I can't say what is the right thing to do in any situation because everything is situationally dependent. However, doing nothing because you froze is the worst thing that you can do because you are no longer in control of anything. I would rather, and I always say this, I would rather you do something, even if it's wrong, like it puts you in a worse situation. That is still better to me than doing like freezing because you can always adjust. And as your body gets moving, I call this your reptilian brain. It kind of starts to take over. So you stop thinking, you start acting. Action is always going to beat reaction. So if you're only reacting to situations, you're always going to be behind. So that's why I say I want you to do something. Even if it was the wrong move, you can always, as long as you're still breathing and can physically move, you can change your course. So, and you're starting to act now, which means that whatever the situation is, if it's an engagement with another person, now they have to start reacting to you and still try to keep up with their own actions. So now they're doing two things at once and not just one. So that just changes that's this cost threshold. So you've shifted the cost higher just by doing something, even if it wasn't the best thing you could have done. So you've changed the cost of them because now they have to deal with you, even if you're being a spaz. That's hard enough to deal with. Spazzes are actually some of the hardest people to deal with, in my opinion, because it's not predictable. As a trained fighter, I have more problem with new people than I do with a seasoned fighter because the pattern recognition isn't there as readily because it's like fighters don't move this way. So it's really like I don't really know what you're doing, and it causes me to stall a little bit, even as long as I've been training. Training makes up for that a little bit, but because you're like, I don't really know what's going on right here, I have to figure it out. You may have bought yourself a quarter of a second to give yourself that 2 inches that you needed to escape. If that makes sense, Sarah.
Yeah. And so what I'm getting from that is we don't have to be trained fighters. We can flail, we can scream, we can slap, we can punch, we can curse like a sailor, whatever it is that you have readily available, use it. And just like a fire hose, let it go.
Yep.
Awesome.
Okay. No,
if anyone has questions,
correct.
Please feel free to drop them in the chat too. I know we are kind of getting close to time, but if you have questions, you can also drop them in.
Yeah, and I know we have the scheduled time, so I want to get this out. I am on here until pretty much we've answered all the questions. So if you guys want to stay for a couple hours, I'm here. So this doesn't affect me at all. I can talk about this for hours, just like my girlfriend can talk about women's health for hours. So
Laura had a question. She wants to know if it's common for people to freeze in situations like this.
So it can be, especially if you've had very limited exposure to conflict. So one thing you can do is you can, if you have friends, you can simulate drills. We call this stress inoculation. So in role playing, so, in my gym, what we'll do when we get to the point where we're like role playing, I'll have somebody act like a bad guy and I'll have them come up and just start motherfucking people. And just that shock value of like, oh, because there's a no swearing rule in my gym. And So if they come in and start doing that, you'll see this shock factor, and it's like, you got to deal with this because he's going to start hitting you soon. And you don't have to get to the point where you're getting too physical, but you need to address those. That's a psychological threat, because that's a lot of times how it happens, just to get you stalling. Hey, what's going on? Or maybe you just have your friend just grab you and just see what you do. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a little bit of role playing goes a long way, because you don't want this stress, this massive amount of stress and adrenaline dump to be the first time it happens to you when your life depends on it. And it's uncomfortable going through this. So it's, it's going to take a little bit of time. And that's, so you just got to be consistent with it, but you don't want to do like hours of it a day. Like 10, 15 minutes a day is fine.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think it's, I hope I speak for the majority in this group that we have not. If you're here, maybe you've never been attacked. So having someone just even go up behind you and like grab your arms, even if you know if it's coming, what's your reaction? Is your reaction to collapse,
Right.
or is your reaction to hit back? It's as simple as
Right.
that. You don't have to like simulate a like, please scare me between this hour and this hour. Just your body will respond in a way that's most natural for you, based off of your nervous system, based off of your environment, based off of all of these things. So it can be as simple as that. And again, once we have that level of self-awareness to know, okay, I am a freezer. Or even think about like verbal altercations that you've had. Maybe you had a fight with your mom or your boyfriend or whatever. Typically, when you are in situations like that, what do? Are you that type of person that like an hour later you're like, why? What? Why? I should have said that. Why didn't I say that? Or are you that person that an hour later you're like, oh my God, why did I say that? Like I just went blind rage on them, whatever that is. We're getting a ton more questions in the chat though. So
Yep.
I can read them off to you, Marcus, if you want. We can move on. You can do whatever you want.
So I tell you what, let me move on to a couple slides and then we'll go back to questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then keep the questions coming for sure. If it gets to the point where like people just can't stay on and we don't have anybody on anymore, or we're like, I can't talk anymore physically, what I'll do is I will address every single one of these questions so that everybody gets an answer from me.
Yeah.
Okay. So no question will go unanswered. So don't be afraid or like you think you're intruding at all. Okay. Okay. So let's move on to the next one. Okay. So this is kind of your fighting mindset. So this actually comes from a military term, and the martial arts world has adopted it because it's extremely good. I've actually put this into practice and trained this with my leadership teams when I worked in corporate America. And I call this the fighting mindset. So this is called the OODA loop, OODA. You can see it from the first letter of each of these words. This was created by, I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but he was a fighter pilot. And this was taught to fighter pilots to teach them how to become better dog fighters. Because you don't have time to think. You don't have time to think. If you think, it's too slow. So you just got to start acting. And essentially what this is, it stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. Okay. So observe and orient is seeing what's happening in real time, and then begin identifying active and potential threats. That's how you would use this in your life for this context. Okay. And then you have to have a decide mode. Okay, what am I going to do next? Am I going to escape? Am I going to fight? Or am I going to hide somewhere? So this is all going to be situational. And then act is just do it. So if you decided you're going to run away next, run away. Don't wait, just do it. If you're going to fight, you need to fight as hard as you possibly can. And then if you're going to hide, you want to get to cover and secure your position, whether that be barricade a door. Maybe that means you get behind a car and you draw your firearm if you're carrying, and you secure it from right there because you got good cover. Okay. So this is something that is a continuous loop. So they call this a loop, and they draw it as a circle in the paragraph, but this is actually a continuous loop that keeps resetting, because every time you act, you have to start observing and oriented based off of their reaction to your action. So this is like a corkscrew. This isn't just a circle. Okay, so it's continuously moving down the line. Okay, so this is the force continuum. So here's how this goes. So we're going to start on the left side, move down, and then move to the right column and move down. Okay. The first level of force is just being there, your physical presence. That's the first level. Okay. Second one is communication. So this can be verbal or physical. So if physical would be like, hey, I stick my hand out, that means stop. People understand that as stop. Okay. Soft control, so that's light touching or restraining. So that'd be like, I'm trying to escort you from the small of your back if I'm a bouncer. For you ladies, maybe that just means, hey, just nice light touch, just, hey, you're close enough, you're in my personal space now. Okay. Hard control. Okay, so that's hitting somebody, or hard physical restraint, like I take you to the ground, then I hold you there. Okay. Less than lethal. So this is, generally speaking, a weapon or some sort of force that's not designed to administer deadly force. So doesn't mean it won't kill the person. It just means it's not designed to do that. Okay. And then there's deadly force. Now, this is a weapon or a level of force that has the ability, maybe not the intent, but it definitely has the ability to administer deadly force. Now, the key to this continuum is you can go from presence to deadly force like that. They do not have to go in order. Things can escalate extremely quickly. You want to master de-escalation. Okay, that's how I know somebody is very, very competent in situational awareness and self-defense skills, if they can generally talk their way out of a situation. Okay, me personally, I have never been in a major bad altercation out on the streets. However, I have been about a half a second from throwing somebody off of a cliff, and Danielle's nodding her head right now. Because they approached our vehicle because I passed them because they were driving 25 in like a 50. And they approached our vehicle 2 or 3 times. I can't remember how many, but he almost got thrown off of a cliff if he would have taken one more step closer to me, because we were in the middle of nowhere. And I ended up talking my way out of doing that, because that would have been a really weird day. So that's what you got to understand. So you have to understand what level you're currently at, in that it can go back down or it can go up very quickly. Okay. Okay, so use of force laws. So this is the statute for Utah. Okay. I cannot say what all other 49 states are, because I actually don't know. So it is your responsibility to look them up. You can easily Google them, and it should there should be at least a link to one of your state websites, so you can actually read the law. There's a lot of law firms that do a good summary of it, and with links to the law that actually do a good explanation, but it's your responsibility. Generally speaking, you can use force when it's a forcible felony. Okay.
So Mark,
for sure in Utah. What's that?
Is that just as simple as typing in your state and then force laws after that?
Yeah, use of force laws and then put your state. Super easy to do. Maybe the statute comes up. If you go to your state Congress, whatever they keep their bills for the government website, there should be a search engine in there too that actually tells you like self-defense or use of force and stuff like that. Okay, so this is Utah again. Like I said, you need to know your use of force. This list may not be a full list for your state, but it is for ours, mine in Utah. These are all the things that can use force. This is up to deadly force. There are certain things that you cannot use deadly force in. In the majority of states, you cannot use deadly force to defend objects. So if you are this is kind of the example that we use. If I'm in my car, I can use up to deadly force to defend myself if I'm being carjacked. If I'm 100 feet away from my car and somebody's trying to steal it, I can no longer use deadly force unless there's a person in there, because I'm not defending a person anymore. I'm defending an object. Okay, so possessions are not allowed, generally speaking, not allowed to be used up to deadly force. Now I could go tackle that person, but I couldn't use deadly force at that point. So if that makes sense. But these, all of these on here on this list in the state of Utah are defense of a person, that being you, a child, or another person, or a group of people. Okay, so that changes the thing. So generally speaking, if it's a person, use of force is generally authorized. Like I said, check your state. If it's an object, usually it's a no-go. Also, precursor, in the state of Utah, your dogs don't count. They count as objects. However, you steal my dog, I'm going to shoot you. So, just saying. Don't recommend that for everybody. So that's just me, my own personal thing. So I'll take that jail time. Okay, and use of force. This is important too. So it's dictated on the following. What is the nature of your danger? So an active shooter is different than somebody pushing you. So your use of force is going to be way different between those two. So you have to understand the nature of the danger. Let me draw my chat here. All right. What's the immediacy of the danger? So are they making threats from across the parking lot, 50 yards away? Or are they 10 feet away from you with a knife? Those are two different immediacy. There's the immediacy of that danger is very different. And what's the probability that the unlawful force would result in death or serious bodily injury? So if you're getting slapped, like a single slap is going to be way different than somebody attacking you to the knee with a baseball bat. Okay. And what's the other, what other violent acts have they just done, or what are their violent propensities? So for example, if somebody's walking across the parking lot and they have a pipe and they're smashing windows and they make eye contact with you and beeline straight to you, you have a reasonable claim to say that person was going to come attack me next based on what they just did. Okay. Prior violent acts also, if you're in a domestic relationship and they have a history of beating on you, that counts as well. Obviously, again, check your state laws. Okay. So this is specific. This is very specific to Utah. However, it does apply in other states as a good reference point. Okay. Okay, so there's weapon categories. These are the four major ones. Impact weapons. So these are hard objects to deliver trauma. So that's like a bat, your fist, elbows, and feet counts. A walking stick, an umbrella, could be your, it could be anything hard that you have in your hand. You have your edge weapons. So that's a knife. That's the most common one. A pen or a pencil works very well. A screwdriver, anything with a tip. Okay. Projectile weapons. So that's firearms. You can throw stuff. Your voice counts as a projectile. Spitting on somebody is a projectile. Anything that goes flying through the air. Okay. And then you have flexible weapons. So this would be like your purse. If you're whipping it, like if you have a long strap purse, it could be a towel where you whip it in their face because, just to get things, that snap, a jacket, your belt. So you can get real creative on improvised weapons with flexible stuff. Okay, so all that info is great. Now, what do I do with it? I think this is a good point to answer some questions before we go into the next thing, which actually directly applies to your running routes. Does that sound good, Sarah? All right, how do I get back to questions?
Sounds good. I can read them off to you if you want.
Yeah, why don't you pick a couple and read them, and then we'll...
Okay, cool. So Natalie said, I live in Chicago where gun violence is pretty prevalent. If someone has a gun to your head, what's the best plan of action? Just give them what they want if they're after your possessions.
Absolutely. That whole, so I know how to do firearm disarms. And I would say 9 out of 10 times, if somebody has a gun to my face and they want my wallet, guess what? They're getting my wallet. If it gets to a point where you think that you giving them possessions is not the end game and they're going to kill you or somebody else, at that point, you got to do what you got to do and you got to fight for your life. But your job in self-defense is to escape. So there are situations where just complying is the best thing, because most of the time for armed robberies, they just want your stuff. That gun is an intimidation factor. And if they really wanted to kill you, they would have just shot you and then taken your stuff. Okay. Now, that's not to say that it could accidentally happen, because whatever. So you do run that risk. However, the more you comply and the less you make that person nervous, the higher probability you'll have to survive just an armed robbery. So you're going to have to judge that situation as it escalates. Okay.
Got it. All right, we've got 2 more. As I read yours, if you have follow-ups or clarifications, you can drop them in. You can unmute yourself. That'll be easier. Okay, is there a certain person that is more likely versus less likely to be targeted? For example, short, tall, smaller bodies, larger bodies, etc. My husband and I practice situational awareness on date nights at dinner. I love that. Who's sitting next to us? What do they look like? What's their body language, etc.?
So this is actually a great question, and that's awesome that you're working that with your partner too, because that's actually really crucial, because you got to be able to read off of each other. So now the answer to this question is yes. However, your body type actually is the least relevant thing. It's actually your attitude and how you carry yourself. So if you're alert and you're looking around and you don't look, you're not, I don't have my phone in front of me, but you're not like this looking at your phone the whole time. You could be 6'4" or 220 pounds of solid muscle. And, you know, if I got 5 guys and I'm just trying to get somebody that I can technically eliminate. When I say eliminate, I mean kill them to take their vehicle that they're standing in front of. That's an easy target because they're not paying attention. The 5 foot tall woman that weighs 105 pounds, if she's walking through her vehicle and doing this, looking around, doesn't have her phone in her face in her phone. She's not distracted by anything. She sees somebody, she makes eye contact with them. She does this little thing to make sure that they're not up to no good. And they walk to the vehicle, they do this around their vehicle, make sure nobody's hiding. That's not an easy target. That's a very alert individual. Okay. So your body composition and your body stature is that's really irrelevant. It's actually how you carry yourself. So for me, I'm 5'10", 160 pounds. I'm not a big guy. I've yet to have somebody that was sober walk up to me and mess with me. I've had sober people try it, and then they learned real quick it was a bad idea because of how I carry myself.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it goes. It's the people that aren't paying attention and don't look like they're situationally aware are the easiest targets. Because again, it's that cost value equation.
Yeah.
Somebody that's paying attention is going to be a real high cost, because maybe I have to chase you to get to you. That looks weird in daylight, or that looks weird in society, unless nobody's around and it's dark. Okay. But
yeah, good point. And even like back to your earlier slide about bad guys don't like working hard. Like
no.
Followed up and said, this is good. I've noticed that people do not like eye contact. People do not like eye contact. You know what else they don't like?
Nope.
Phone call. Hey, there's someone looking funny at me. He is about this tall. He looks like this. They don't like eye contact. They don't like being recorded. And you know what? I say this all the time. I'd rather you look like a crazy woman and be like, why was this person just recording me? And you can apologize and you can learn from it. Then something bad happened and you say, why didn't I trust my gut?
That's 100% right. And let's be serious. With the attention span of people today, they're probably going to forget about it because they're worried about the next TikTok reel that they want to watch. So if you're wrong, but if you're right, guess what? You don't make the news. So
right. Last question. Sarah wants to know, if you're being physically attacked by someone stronger than you, what can you do to get away or fight back?
Okay, so again, this one depends. So I'm not going to go into specific techniques, but however, so you have to be able to identify, just because they're stronger than you, what level of force are they using against you? So if somebody is bigger than you, I'll use myself as an example. If somebody's has 50 pounds on me and is solid muscle, but they're just punching me, I can only, generally speaking, return the exact same force that they're giving me. So I can really only go non-lethal with them. Maybe I can use some pepper spray to defend myself because I'm not the aggressor, but I can't escalate much higher than that. Okay. Now, if you're a woman and you're getting handed on the ground, and you're getting, everybody thinks it's Fast and Furious in our neighborhood. Sorry if you hear that car. But if you're, as a female, there's a huge disparagement of force, and you feel that there's some severe bodily injury going to happen, or an abduction going to happen, any of those lists of things that those forcible felonies, the force continuum can go up because you are allowed, and I'll say this in the state of Utah, obviously check your laws, but if somebody's really doing damage to you and you're going to have severe bodily injury, you need to escalate that force to a weapon ASAP. So if, for example, you're getting picked up and slammed onto the concrete, you can make a very valid argument that my head had the possibility of slamming in that cement and I could have died or gotten severely bodily injured. Obviously, you don't want to get to that point because somebody's that close to you, you missed something major. But you need to carry a weapon with you, which is one of the things that I highly recommend moving into the forward slide. So again, it comes down to that force continuum, what force is being used against you, and then understanding your use of force laws. So that's how those tie together. If that didn't answer your question, please let me know.
There, you good? And I know we're going to get into weapons too, but I also want to give the caveat that, again, state laws, country laws.
Yes.
But weapons mean whatever you are comfortable with. If you don't want to run with a knife, don't run with a knife. You can run with a ton of other things. So just remember, as Mark goes through all of the different options, if something immediately makes you feel unsafe because I don't want to hold a knife with me, okay, you do not need to be that person. You can go through the other list of many things that we can do. So I just wanted to throw that disclaimer out to you before we move forward.
Yeah, and let me be clear. A weapon doesn't have to be a dedicated weapon. It could be an improvised weapon. It could be something else that isn't actually, its purpose isn't actually to be a weapon, that you turn into a weapon because you had no other choice.
Yep.
And also force is force. Force isn't indicative of a weapon. If I put you in a rear naked choke and I don't let you go, you're going to die. That's lethal force. I didn't use a weapon. I just choked you. So it's not necessarily going to a weapon. The weapon is actually the easiest route to get ahead of somebody in the force continuum. It's the most efficient way. That's why guns are used in war and in robberies and murders. Okay. It doesn't have to be that. There are more people killed by hammers or blunt force objects every year than there are firearms. So take that into consideration. So, but yes, that's basically the synopsis. You just have to understand the force and then be willing to use the appropriate amount of force to get yourself out of the situation.
Perfect.
Cool.
We've got a lot of questions regarding pepper spray and weapons. I'm going to hold on them because
let's hold on those.
Next, and then if there's anything we didn't touch, I can bring it back up. Yep.
We'll hold on those because we get into a good conversation or a good topic about weapons. I'll answer any weapon stuff. Okay. So I in my preparation for this, I came up with this nice little acronym for everybody. And it is run like a pro. So when you are going on a run, here's a great way to develop situational awareness about that entire run or the vast majority of that run before you even step foot on it. Okay. So first off, plan. Everybody has a phone. You use it. You can Google Map everything or whatever map app that you like best. Plan out your route on Google Maps. Most of the maps now have 3-dimensional like street views. You can see what is on that route. Okay. Yes, they're all during daylight. So if you're running at nighttime, that is kind of relevant. We address that. Okay. So you should have a general idea of where you're going to be, what's going to be around you during your run before you even step foot on it. Okay. Now, research. Drive, if it's, if it's obviously, if it's not a trail run, that's going to be different. But if it's on the road, you can drive it. So drive it in your car. Drive it during daylight hours so you can see firsthand what is there. So if you're driving through a city, drive it. Make sure you know what's there. And then also drive it at the time of your run. Because if I'm planning my run at 4:00 in the morning, but I drive it at noon, that environment is going to be vastly different. Because one's daylight hours, one's nighttime hours, one's peak activity hours, one's probably the lowest activity hours. So you get a feel for the visual aspect of it. Oh, cool. Like I can see everything. And then if it's a nighttime run, you drive it at the time you're going to run it. So you get to see what is the natural environment of the run during that time. Okay, if that makes sense. And then you observe while you're driving it. If you drive the loop a couple times, I know gas is expensive right now, but drive it a couple times. It's okay. Figure out what are the major landmarks you want to look for. What are the public buildings? Like, okay, is there gas stations that I can gain easy access to? Is there a police department on my way? What buildings are, generally open to the public, stuff like that. Look for pinch points and bottlenecks. Those are crucial. If there's going to be an ambush attack on you, that's where they're going to be at. So that means that there may be one or possibly two ways out of that. And that could just be like, hey, this person has this van running there by this alleyway. And they just happen to be parked directly across from the alleyway with the sliding door facing the alleyway. That's a pinch point because you got to run past that, and a well-timed person coming out of the alleyway with somebody in the van, that's a 2-second deal. Okay. That's an extreme example. However, that's, like I said, that's the biggest fear that I get from most women. But so you got to be able to identify that stuff. And these bottlenecks could just be like, hey, there's a busy intersection here with a lot of people. Okay, so when there's a lot of people don't necessarily make you safe. People don't pay attention to shit. There's, everybody's in their phones. They're not looking at stuff. And if you look at, there's been a lot of experiments lately where people will video they're actors. It's not actually happening, but people literally snatching a kid from their parents' hands and no bystanders around did anything to help them. So just because people are around doesn't actually mean you're safer or somebody's going to come to your aid. So I always like to say, nobody is coming to save you. Okay. And if you don't believe me, you may have heard of this incident recently called the Uvalde school shooting, where 378 officers showed up to this school and waited 74 minutes to go and kill this guy that they should have killed in the first 2 minutes and didn't. So people they make errors, they make mistakes. They're not always going to be there to save you. So you need to be able to be your first line of response. Okay. Also, so yeah, check out what the normal activity is. So that's people, how much traffic there is, and animals, because animals will tell you a lot actually. So if there's barking dogs are great because they will tell you, like, they bark at things that shouldn't be there sometimes, or they're just there. They bring your attention to things. Okay. Cell reception. This is a big one that people never think about. Everybody, oh, I always have cell phone reception. Well, if I don't have cell phone reception, you can't call for help, right? Well, here's the other thing. If I do this recon and I go through this and I had full real cell phone reception, and now all of a sudden they came to the spot, I have no cell phone reception. That should be a red flag, because I can go on Amazon or eBay, spend $25 and get a cell phone jammer to keep you from using your cell phone. I just have to, I just have to be within 100 feet of you. So those are big that's a big telltale that something is off in that environment. Okay. And then what's the visibility? So are there street lights if you're running at night? Is it open? Are there objects everywhere? Are there alleyways that are blocked and they're hard to see? Are there a lot of alleyways? Because blind spots are really where everybody hides if they're going to do something bad, because they want the element of surprise. So that's a very easy, very simple thing to do. We called it in the executive protection training that I did. This is what we call an advance work. So we do this before our principal or the person we're protecting would show up. So if anybody has an executive protection detail and they have more than one person, they're doing this. So like, for example, like the president, the Secret Service shows up weeks in advance and does their advance and knows everything about that site before the president shows up. That the same thing works for anybody that can afford to pay for an executive protection. This is why there's no public there's very few public humiliations. There's almost zero public assassinations for politicians and rich people. It's all because of this methodology. So this right here is probably the most important thing you can do to prevent anything bad from happening to you. So I will take questions on this right here, actually. This specific thing.
Yeah, if you guys have any. I think jumping in here too, like one thing that I talk about a lot with my clients has nothing to do with this, but like planning ahead your meals for the week, like doing things that, you know, feel so cumbersome, make it enjoyable. Like obviously this is something that needs to be taken very seriously, but can you bring a friend? Can you bring your spouse? Can you bring your pet? Can, you know, yes, we want you to stay aware of your surroundings. Yes, we want you to go and do all of these things, but it doesn't have to be this like insane thing that takes up 4 hours every week or anything like that. Like we can make it, you know, and you can, if you have another runner friend, hey, I want to go check out my routes. I actually never paid attention to like how safe they maybe are or aren't. Do you want to do it with me? Because that's the ripple effect. If you can take someone and teach them what you're learning right here, they're going to go and they're going to do the same for someone in their network. And that's how we take care of each other. That's how we make running like a pro an everyday thing. That doesn't have to be scary. That doesn't have to be cumbersome. It's just, I want to check out a new route. On my drive home, I'm going to take the 10-minute longer road to see, you know, what the daylight looks like, what, if there's any bridges, anything like that.
Yep.
If you guys have questions, you can jump in though.
Yep. And I'll address Brooke's comment here about, you know, making her feel better and running in Alaska. Yeah. Running in the trails in Alaska, you're more likely to be attacked by a moose or a bear than you are a person. So, you know, that essentially, you know, you, like I said, you got to know your environment. So, but yeah, that's exactly right. And this is easy to teach. You can teach your kids this. You can teach your kids this. What should they be looking for? Like, what are things like this it doesn't take long to make this second nature. Like, I know Danielle's probably shaking her head right now, but I do this without even realizing that I do it. Like I already know my escapes within 30 seconds of walking into a new building that I've never been in. Like I already know where I'm going to go. If it could be wrong, but I already know where I'm going to go, because then because if it's wrong, I can always change my plan on the fly, but I won't be frozen there for 30 seconds trying to figure out what the heck's going on when all the sheeple that don't know anything and are stuck in their phones and, you know, can't put 30 seconds of forethought in what's happening. So, you know, generally speaking, where the sheeple are running to, I'll probably go the opposite way because they're probably running the wrong way. So,
yeah, and I think the last point that I'll make before we move on too is like type in the chat box. Did you have someone teach you when you were younger to put your keys between your fingers when you were walking somewhere unsafe? Did anyone ever grow up? Am I the only one that grew up learning that? Natalie says yes. Jenny says yes. Yeah. So this is just a continuation of that. we don't have, most cars don't come with keys anymore. So this is how we can continue to educate ourselves, educate each other. These are the things that we do in the event that you get attacked, in the event that something horrible happens.
Yep. And we'll address that key thing because that's actually an important thing that we'll get into. So, all right, let's move on. Okay, so here are some things that I put together to behavioral best practices. Okay, so ladies, I know you love your outfits, and this is actually something that's awesome. Don't tell your boyfriends or husbands that I told you this, but you actually have permission to have multiple outfits for your running and stuff. Because guess what? If you are being stalked or you are being targeted, people will remember somebody that looks the same all the time. You're an easier target. So your outfit prep with your everyday carry. You should have a flashlight with you. You should have a lethal option with you, in my opinion, if you feel comfortable enough. A non-lethal option in some sort of distractor or de-escalation tools. So we'll get into what those are. The randomness. This is your clothing, so your accessories. So do I wear a hat when I run all the time? Do I wear the same hat every single time? Change that up. Have a couple different hats. Have a couple different hat styles. That way, it's like, oh, it's this girl that always wears a Nike hat. She has 3 different colors. She always wears it the same way. She always has the same sunglasses on. I may not see her face, but hey, guess what? I know the hat and I know the sunglasses because I see them enough. And then they always wear that same type of shoes because, most people only have 1 pair of running shoes at a time, maybe 2, but usually they're the same. Okay. You can have the same brand, but change your colors up a little bit. Change your running hats and your sunglasses. Don't run with those the same way on the same route every single time. Okay. Also, if you wear running vests or running belts, have 2 of those, 2 or 3 of those if you can afford them. Obviously, if you're on a budget, I totally get it. However, it will make a big difference because now you're harder to identify because the major running clothing that is obvious is going to change. So your leggings and your sports bra or whatever you run in, the normal clothes, yeah, those are easier to have lots of, but most people don't think about the accessories. I will target accessories with people before I'll target their clothing because people generally wear the same accessories. So people generally like 1 pair of sunglasses. So they wear that same pair of sunglasses. So I can just look for that pair of sunglasses as opposed to other features. And a trained criminal or a well-practiced criminal or predator, we'll call them, knows that stuff. They understand what to look for. So the more random you make it, the harder you make it for them. Okay. Now, how do you add randomness to your route if you're doing like a loop or it's a long straight line? Okay. Well, that's actually kind of easy too. Pick a spot to cross the street randomly for not a real reason. Not like it's at an intersection. Like pick a spot, but pick a different spot each time you do it. So don't cross the street at the exact same intersection every time. Maybe you cross well before the intersection because crossing the street will really change the plans of somebody if they were in your path. So now they have to react to, oh, I was expecting her over here. Now she's over there. What do I do now? And maybe that's just, well, I'm out of position. I'm done. And if they really still want to pursue they'll have to make it obvious because now they have to cross the street. If you're coming up on a bottleneck, whether it was one that you knew about or you didn't know about, stop maybe 50 yards ahead of it, 40 yards ahead of it. Just stop and stretch, but look at the bottleneck. Maybe stop and tie your shoes. Just take a look at your surroundings because a lot of times what's happening is if there's a spotter, they'll pace it. They'll that's like waiting, they're expecting you at a certain time because you're running at a specific pace. Now all of a sudden you stopped. And now there's got to be some sort of communication if they're working as a team. Or if it's that one person, they got to start figuring out what you're doing. And you'll see a dramatic body change in anybody that's watching you. So that's just a little monkey wrench that you throw in their engine and their plan. That's just like, oh, well, this was not what I was expecting. And that may be just enough for them to give themselves away if you missed it. Okay. And then if you drive to your running routes, which I used to do all the time, don't park in the same spot. Everybody likes their parking area. If you can park in different spots randomly, never park in the same spot twice, that's going to be even harder to know that you're there. Okay. So that's how you add randomness. And these aren't the only ways. You can think of a million different ways to add randomness into what you do, but you don't want to be predictable. When you're predictable, you become much easier to target. Okay. Friends and allies. So there's always going to be strength in numbers as long as they are an ally and a friend. Okay. Strength in numbers with the general public isn't actually a thing because you're not on the same team. You're not working as a team. You're all individual. Everybody's an individual. They're not looking out for each other. They're only looking out for themselves. So with friends and allies, like I said, run with friends. If you have a friend, run with them. 2 people are harder to deal with than 1. Because then you've just doubled the variables that can possibly happen. And you guys are looking out, you're looking out for each other. And you can work as a team. And you can plan things like, hey, if somebody all of a sudden comes out and grabs one of us, what are we going to do? Oh, well, you know what? Like, let's practice this. Let's figure out just some sort of general plan. We'll have our boyfriend or whatever grab us. Somebody grabs us and I just do something. And we'll figure out like how they react to it. And you start getting pattern recognition on like, oh, okay, well, that didn't really work at all, but this one did work. So it doesn't have to be complicated. Keep it simple. Always, always keep it simple. Another thing you can do is join a running group. Because then you're strength in numbers automatically. And you start talking with people. And because you are a group running the same route, you kind of start looking out for each other innately. Because it's like, oh, are they keeping up? Or they new? We want to, we want the new person to feel like welcome. So you're engaging with each other. Also, if you're, if you can't find somebody to run with, because maybe you're, too fast or whatever, or just you like running by yourself, which is totally understandable. Make friends with the business owners on your route or the workers in the route. So the people that are going to be there naturally, that should be there. Go in and talk to the coffee shop. Go in and say hi to the people that work there out on the curb or whatever, or the kiosks or whatever, because then you have friends. You're developing friends and allies as you run. And I'm sorry, but if one of my friends gets attacked, I'm jumping in. I would jump in with a stranger, but old me who didn't know anything, I don't even know what to do if a random person gets attacked. Like I would just be calling the police. Hey, this is happening. So now I got to wait for a police response, which is generally what happens. But if you know the person, they're more unlikely to get involved when something bad happens. You can't trust a stranger to help you. And that's kind of like what that philosophy is. You're trying to gain them as an ally so that if something happens, they come to your aid, because you're going to come to a friend's aid before you come to a stranger's aid. I think we can all kind of agree on that one. And the last one, social media. Everybody loves to post to social media, which is totally fine. However, you have to be aware. There's this thing called metadata in all of your pictures. So when you post it to social media, it contains your GPS tags and a timestamp. So if somebody really wants to find you, it's not hard. Okay. So if you're on a route and you're like, oh, selfie, post it to social media, and they pull that off there, they can find out the exact GPS coordinate and the exact time that you did it. And if you don't believe me, this is how the United States government targets terrorists throughout the world, is because their dumbasses keep posting selfies on Facebook and Instagram. So we pull that metadata out, a drone goes over top and drops a Hellfire missile on them. That's how we find people. This is not hard. There's several websites where if you type in metadata, it'll bring you to it. You upload the photo and it'll pull all the metadata out of it, and I'll be able to find when and where the picture was taken, and probably the IP address of the phone, because then I can track your phone then too. So there's a lot of things that you can find out just by a simple social media page that people don't realize. So I'm not saying don't be on social media. However, just be vigilant about what you post. Okay. Maybe, maybe you just don't post your run stuff. So if that's the big concern. So, let's see. Okay, everyday carry. So this is my recommendation for people, that you should have everyday carry. However, I understand if you're out for a run, some of this stuff is going to be much harder to carry. Okay, first off, I am a huge proponent of firearms. You do not have to be. If you choose not to carry a firearm, that is perfectly fine. However, a firearm is the most efficient and effective lethal force tool you can have. Okay. It's not a matter of convenience. It's not a matter of comfort. It's a matter of convenience to carry a firearm. Okay. So especially handguns like this one. So you can get small firearms now. Me personally, I could run with this and it wouldn't bother me because of my stature. However, if you're a smaller statured female, this may be a little bit cumbersome to carry with you on a run without the proper holster. Okay, so there's different carrying options. We're not really going to get into those because this is going to be probably the last thing people carry. 99% of the time when I go for a run, I don't carry a firearm. So if I don't do it, the rest of the population most likely will not be doing it, because I carry almost everywhere. So if I'm not, I generally don't, just because of comfort, and I'm fast enough that I'll just run away. Okay. But I do carry a knife. So this is one of the examples. This is something that I do carry. It's just a 4-inch little tiny blade. They're simple to use. They're legal almost everywhere. There are states that they're not legal to use them for self-defense. So if you have a knife on you, it is for cutting your apples up or cutting boxes open. You can't technically carry these for self-defense. New York is one of those states. So New York City, very specifically New York City, anywhere in upstate New York, you're still not allowed to carry a knife for self-defense. I'm pretty positive it's upstate New York. You cannot. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Like I said, I can only speak to Utah. But I know for a fact in the city of New York, you cannot carry a knife for self-defense. They're actually going to the point where you're not allowed to carry a knife at all. I don't know if that law is passed or where it's at, but these are simple to use. They're extremely effective. Different states will have different length restrictions, so you got to check that. Okay. The other thing you should have is a flashlight. So these are two examples. There's all kinds of fun, cool colors out here. I like the tactical colors personally. It's just what I'm into. There's easy ways to keep these on your hands. So I have a hair tie here, and then I have another one here. There's other ways to do this, but basically I just strap this to my hand, and now I have a hands-free unit. So if I go for a run, I actually can run like semi-loose, and I don't have to worry about gripping this until I absolutely need it. Okay. So these don't have to be a matter of uncomfort, like non-comfort. Okay. These can be pretty comfortable to have in your hand. They're lightweight. They don't weigh a lot. They super bright. You want the thumb buttons that way. So when I hit this, the light goes on that way. I don't have to orient the knife or the blade, the flashlight in a different way. I can also use this to hit with. Okay. If I shine this in your eyes at night, I get standoff distance. Standoff distance means I can create distance in space. If you have a bright enough flashlight, I can keep you at distance and blind you for up to 150 to 200 meters. So this has been used in war zones to keep standoff distance because it blinds you at night. You can't catch the person. So if you blind them, turn the light off, move, they figure out where you're at, you blind them again, and you keep doing it until you escape. So I know people that specialize in low light stuff. Pretty good friend of mine. He's proven that he can get standoff distance to 200 yards with the proper light. That's a long way. So these are super and they're not expensive. So that's the best part. And it's a flashlight. It's a non-threatening tool that you can have that is massively effective. Okay. And then some sort of de-escalation device. So, a lot of times, people aren't a threat. Okay. The ones that come up and bum a smoke, a lot of times they're not a threat. They're just stressed and poor. So, obviously you're going out for a run, carrying a pack of cigarettes on you doesn't make a lot of sense, but you can carry a lighter because a lot of people don't have lights. I've done that before just to not, it's kind of a sign of respect, and you just helped this person out. Somebody that you just helped out that was legitimately asking probably isn't going to escalate. However, if you deny them, maybe they're just going to be agitated, and it just maybe turn into like a crime of passion at that point because they're super stressed. Okay. Cash and small bills. If you have some vagrants asking for money, sometimes it's easier to pay them to go away. It's just how it is. I've given $10 to people just to leave me alone because I just didn't feel like talking them down. So, I mean, it's not a lot of money. And if they walk away immediately, hey, guess what? That's a solid thing. And they make some cool sound alarms now, which are really cool. So you can hang them on your belt or your vest or whatever, or even just attach them to like a little wrist thing. Some of them are separated ones. So like you pull them off of your vest and you drop it, and it's just like an alarm that goes off, and it's really loud. So what that does is it creates a distraction. It'll draw attention to where you're at, because people will look at an alarm, at least like, hey, what is that sound? Because it's annoying. And if it doesn't shut off, you'll definitely have somebody eventually come and investigate it. They're real lightweight, and they're super loud. And I have candy on here too, because sometimes there's been psychological studies done with people that are highly agitated and going through a stressful state. And that's what they're going to be in if they're up to no good, i.e. trying to attack you or create or commit a felony or some sort of other crime. If you carry a little like mini candy bar on you or something, say, hey, do you want something to eat? They found that like 8 out of 10 times they said yes and took the food, because something physiologically makes you want to eat food when you get into that state. So that proposition of food, they take it, and all of a sudden now you've distracted them from what their original goal was. So it de-escalated it a little bit, and it also distracted them. So you've just bought yourself time, which is super important in a self-defense situation. Time is super important. Okay, so now since we're on the everyday carry, keys. Now we mentioned keys between your hands. Okay, so that is an option. Okay, now let's talk about some of the downside to that option. Generally speaking, what's on our keys? Keychain. Our keys to our vehicle, right? Okay, now if the keys I'm using and the keys to your vehicle are on that same key ring, and I get into an altercation and I hit somebody and those keys come out of my hand, because that is not a stable tool to use, because most people put it between their knuckles, which is the least stable way to do it, instead of holding it between their index finger and thumb and basically like poking your thumb into them. If I lose that, now I've lost my car keys. Now I have no way to escape that area. And a vehicle can also pose as a form of shelter from the attack if you can get into there and lock the doors. Now I don't have that option anymore. Okay, so keep that into consideration. If you're going to use keys for a defensive use tool, keep your car keys on separate from those. Okay, so that's kind of a little tip that people don't quite think through the problem fully on, like, what are the downsides to that. So that's kind of some forward thought for you. Let me see what the next slide is before I take a question. I think we're good. Okay, yeah. So does anybody have any questions here? Because this is pretty close to the end.
Yeah, I do want to jump in with a couple of questions, because I know let's try to wrap in like 10 to 15, because I know a lot of people
Yep.
have to go.
Okay.
But some questions that came in, there were a lot about pepper spray. I'll come back to that. In terms
Mhm.
of the keys and the awareness, one person said, "What should you do if you feel unsafe getting back to or inside your vehicle? For example, someone is lurking or lingering and you feel trapped and unable to get into your vehicle alone."
Okay, so that is a really good question. So, um, if you can get into the vehicle with enough space and time, that is always going to be your best scenario because you can always lock those doors, turn the car on, and drive away. Okay. However, if somebody's blocking you or too close to you to get there, one thing you can do, because we have the habit of, well, I guess that really wouldn't work. Okay. So depending on how the car works. Okay. So one option could be to just go to the opposite side of the car, not your driver's side, to throw them off because they're probably going to be lurking on your driver's side. However, when you unlock cars, if you unlock the driver's side, then the next one, all the doors unlock. So you do have that probability of them still being able to access the vehicle. The other side of it is if you have kind of done a little bit of your due diligence on and your situational awareness, and you've built this pro model into your daily life, you'll already know where your exits are. So if I'm coming out of a restaurant, for example, at night and going back to my vehicle, and there's somebody lurking there, go back into the restaurant. So here's basically the protocol for executive protection teams, and this is why this works a lot. If something happens, the first move to get that person that we're protecting, in this case, it's yourself, is go back to the last area that was secure. So if we're coming out of a building and somebody throws a pie at us, I'll go back into the building. And if I'm protecting somebody, I'll bring them back into the building because I know I wasn't getting attacked with pies there. So just go back to where you were because you know that area, you just came from that area, so you know it's going to be safe. That will give you time to reassess your situation. It will also give you time to see what is that person's motives. If they stick around there and actually get closer to your vehicle or move to a position that even looks more mischievous, you know that person was up to no good. If after like 2 minutes, they just leave, cool. You just cleared the area. Now you can go back out. So retreating is always a valid option.
Awesome. Thank you. And then we've got like 3 or 4. I'm trying to consolidate them.
Okay.
So tips if pepper spray is illegal in your country, and information for Canadian runners if discussion surrounds personal protection. So I'm just going to assume that in Canada you cannot use pepper spray. So maybe I think it's just back to that point that you made that you need to Google self-defense in your country or state.
Right. And so let me just address pepper spray in general or some sort of aerosol spray. Okay, so there's 2 schools of thought on it. It's a good idea, and then there's the people that don't like it at all. I fall into the idea that I don't like it at all. This is why. And you can have your own opinion. Like I said, there's 2 schools of thought. I know people that have used, I know females who have used pepper spray with good effect. Okay. I've also seen instances of people using pepper spray or an aerosol spray in defensive use and it get in their own face. So that's a major risk. There's also people that can fight through that pepper spray. So a lot of times it won't do, like in pepper spray is not hard to fight through. If you're determined enough, you're gonna be able to fight through it. It's just the initial shock factor that gets people. The other thing is, here's one of the other things, and in the last couple of years, it's become even more prevalent. So I don't know what the state of current people's environment is, especially with the population, but what have we been forced to wear for the last 2 years? A mask, right? Where do we spray pepper spray? In the face, specifically the nasal cavity and the eyes. So if they're wearing glasses and a mask, the effectiveness of that pepper spray has gone down tremendously. Okay, so you have to understand the nature of your weapon. In this case, it's pepper spray, and its possible limitations. So those are some limitations to it. However, if you nail somebody and they go down, yeah, they're done. Okay. So it does work. However, it can be very, very unreliable. The other thing that comes into play is if it's windy, that if it's a mist or a foam style, depending on the what you're allowed to have and what you have access to, will drastically affect its accuracy and range. So if it's really windy and you have a mist style, the wind is going the wrong way. It's either going to blow in your face, or it's not even going to get to the person because it's going to be blown off to the side. So take those things into consideration if you choose to carry some sort of aerosol spray.
Awesome. Okay. Any other questions, guys, before we start to wrap up? All right.
Okay.
Oh, I have one question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
How do you feel about stun guns? Because like I know they're not legal everywhere, and they have like all types of ones that some that you just carry in your hand, like the little knuckle thing. Some are disguised as lipstick or perfume.
Yep.
What do you think about those? Is it like too much of like, hey, I have to be in close contact with this person, or
yeah? So
is it an option?
There's a couple things on that one. Yeah. So like you said, it's a very, very close contact weapon. Like they're on you because you actually have to put that against their skin or a t-shirt. Okay. It's most effective against skin. So what they're wearing for clothing is going to dramatically affect how effective that tool is. Okay. The same thing for a taser, which is the fish hooks that go flying. If they have a heavy coat on, it may not impact the skin properly. So again, that, understanding the limitations, and then also with those, you have to maintain a certain level of charge. So if you're lazy on keeping it charged, it may not even have enough oomph behind it to have its effect. So however, if you really nail them with something like that, they'll go down. But again, there's people that can fight through it. So it still comes down to that limitation of, what is the tool that I have? What is it? What are potential limitations? And then you want to have alternative plans if that fails. Does that make sense? Cool. Okay, so let me leave you with this one. This is like probably my life mantra. Okay. The devil whispers, you cannot withstand this storm. The warrior whispers back, I am the storm. So everything, any limitation, anything in your life, no matter if it's what we're talking about today or anything else, you are the one that dictates the storm because you are the storm. I didn't mention this. I'm a cancer survivor, and that was just in 2018. So I actually have a wristband that Danielle got me that says I am the storm. And I wore that every day. And this was my mantra going through that. So how bad of a day I had was me. It wasn't cancer. It wasn't anything else in my life. It's you. So if you go in with that mindset of your run's going to be better. Something happens, guess what? That's going to be a bad day for that other person, not you. So your attitude towards all of this goes a really, really long way. With your will to overcome and survive any situation. So if any questions are here, you can definitely, I will stay to answer questions, ideas, whatever. What I have here is a list of different flashlights that I do recommend. They're not going to be the prettiest. Okay. So if you're looking for something colorful, these are not it. However, they're good quality. I've taken into consideration weight and cost. I've had economical ones, and there's some higher end ones here, like Surefire brand is very high end, but they are bright. The other brands, they can be just a little bit more complicated. So understand the complexity of your flashlights. If you go with them, Olight brand has had some quality issues with their batteries actually like blowing up, but I don't know if they've been fixed. Maybe they have. It's a Chinese brand completely and wholly owned, so quality is going to be weird, but they do have some awesome colors. So if that's your thing, just try your stuff out. and make sure it all has a thumb switch. Lethal tools. These are mostly going to be knives. Actually, these are all going to be knives. These are the weights, the costs to them. So these are pretty low costs. There's some higher end options. They're tiny. They weigh almost nothing. So there really isn't much of a reason to put them on your person because they're not going to add much weight. And for the most part, you'll never need them. But if you need it, you're going to be really glad it's there. And some non-lethal things that options that people don't think of. If you carry like some coins, like a handful of pennies, and you throw them at somebody, that's going to hurt. And that's going to give you some time to get distance and keep them from closing in on you. If there's rocks on your trail, pick up one, carry it. Here's one that I like to tell runners: frozen water bottles. So if you freeze a normal standard water bottle, 16-ounce water bottle, that's 1 pound of ice that you're going to end up either throwing at somebody or hitting them with. That's going to suck. The mini water bottles that are like 8 ounces, maybe a little bit more feasible if you're smaller statured. Carry 2 of them. That way you can throw one and you can keep one in reserve to hit with. Okay. A whistle just to get people's attention. Also, it may rupture their eardrum if it's close enough. Lets people know you need help. Keychain alarms just creates a distraction. There's some of these non-lethal ones. It's the Cold Steel brand Pocket Shark. Essentially, it's a really hard, thick Sharpie that weighs like it's like $5. Just keep it in your hand, and they're just extremely durable. You can break cinder blocks with them, and it's literally a Sharpie. So those are your options. And then there's some tactical pens. Don't pay a lot of money for them because it's just they don't write for shit. But they got a nice little point on them, and it's something that's not intimidating for people that are not a threat to you. So those are some options. And I want to say thank you to everybody for joining. I know this is super important. If you want to follow me on Instagram, this is my Instagram handle. If there's any questions that you have that you think of later, you can reach out to me directly here. I'm super responsive. I like to engage with people because like I said, I totally nerd out on this stuff and I could talk about it all day. And then if it's something that I deem that I haven't covered before, I may put a video out on it. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you everyone for being here. Marcus, if you don't mind stopping to share your screen. This is my final ask to you all that are here is please take a screenshot of this screen or whatever you're looking at right now and share to your story one thing that you learned today. Just one thing. Remember what I was talking about earlier today about the ripple effect? If you can teach someone one thing that you learned, they can be better prepared. They can teach that to someone else. So please share that to your story. Please include Marcus and tag him, tag me. I'm at, I know we don't all follow each other. I am Sara Hayes. Marcus is Warrior Meets Scholar, if you want to drop that in the chat box. Yeah. But I'll lift up my phone, take a photo of all of us, and then let you guys go. All right, Melanie, if anyone wants to take themselves off of video, go ahead. If not, and I know you, I'll tag you. But thank you so much, everyone. 1, 2, 3. All right. We will see you guys around. I hope this was helpful. And we'll send out the replay, some links, some TLDRs, all of the good things, probably early to mid next week. But as always, if you have questions, please DM me or Marcus. We're really passionate about this, and we would love to make sure that you feel supported and confident on your runs, walks, all of the things. All right. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.